Jason Arday and the operating costs of the system that made him DEI, Progressive Institutional Frame in Elite Academia. Score 6 out of 50. This is not a morality tale. It is a diagnostic of a high-cost belief system colliding with reality. The facts that matter. Jason Arday was appointed Professor of Sociology of Education at Cambridge in 2023 and immediately became the university's youngest black professor. The appointment was celebrated precisely because of the extraordinary backstory that accompanied it: nonverbal until 11, illiterate until 18, autism and other medical diagnoses, and remarkable athletic and fundraising feats, including claims of running 30 marathons in 35 days and raising £5.5 million for charity. Cambridge and much of the progressive media presented him as living proof that the equity framework worked. By July 2026, the framework met evidence it could not easily absorb. Detailed analysis showed extensive overlap between Arday's 2015 PhD thesis and an earlier dissertation. Further reporting uncovered repeated patterns in published papers: false or heavily inflated claims about visiting appointments, athletic records, fundraising totals, and childhood experiences that schoolmates contradicted. Cambridge eventually opened a formal investigation into his appointment and qualifications. Arday resigned on 15th August. On 14th August, he was found dead. Police described the death as unexpected and not suspicious. His family and many supporters attributed it to a campaign of misinformation and public hounding. The individual choices and the institutional choices are both real. Treating only one as causal is incomplete. The maps applied minds, identity protective cognition, identity fused tightly around race, neurodivergence, and the equity narrative. Questioning the specific claims was rapidly interpreted as an attack on the entire category. Once the backstory and the academic record became the vehicle for institutional virtue, updating carried high psychological and social cost. The system had strong incentives to treat scrutiny itself as the moral problem. Incentives and coordination. Institutions and media were rewarded for elevating the symbol and penalized for applying ordinary standards of evidence. Warnings about the work circulated inside Cambridge for years and were managed rather than investigated with normal seriousness. Liverpool John Moores had already conducted a process that left the PhD intact under a generous reading of honest error. The payoff structure favored narrative coherence over accuracy until the gap became public and undeniable. Status and capture. Arday functioned as high-status proof of concept. Defending him conferred progressive capital. Criticizing the record risked the label of racist, ableist, or anti-diversity. Status rewards flowed toward those who protected the map. Status costs flowed toward those who tested it. That is capture. Error correction. The cost of surfacing inconvenient facts was systematically high. Early internal concerns were deflected. When the evidence reached the public, the dominant institutional and progressive response shifted from examining the claims to attacking the motives and identity of those examining them. Even after resignation and death, large parts of the response continued to treat rigorous public scrutiny of a public academic's public claims as the primary offense. That is fragile error correction in action. Scale. Cambridge's prestige and the broader media ecosystem amplified both the original elevation and the subsequent refusal to update cleanly. What might have remained a contained academic integrity issue became a national referendum on the legitimacy of the equity project itself. Scale turned local failure modes into systemic ones. The post-death reaction is further data. The intensity of the response after 14 August is itself diagnostic. Vigils, petitions for inquiries into media coverage, language of lynching, racist feeding frenzy, and institutional murder all treat the exposure of documented problems as the moral catastrophe. This is exactly what high-cost systems do when their cost structure is made visible. They attempt to raise the price of noticing still higher. The maps predict this. It is not mysterious once the operating costs are measured. A lower-cost system would have applied consistent standards early, accepted the evidence when it arrived, and protected the individual's dignity without requiring the suppression of facts. This system did the opposite for years and then, when forced, still struggled to prioritize accuracy over identity protection. What the case actually shows, Arday bears responsibility for the fabrications and the academic work that did not meet ordinary standards, the institutions that elevated him without adequate scrutiny and that treated ordinary verification as suspect, share responsibility for creating the conditions in which those fabrications could scale. The media that finally did the verification work performed a necessary function, even if the volume and tone of some coverage was heavy. The deeper point is structural. When a system makes identity tightly fused to contested empirical claims, when it rewards status for defending the narrative and punishes status for testing it, and when it treats error correction as a form of violence, the outcome is predictable. Poster boys are created, scrutiny is delayed, collapse, when it comes, is more destructive than it needed to be, and the system's first instinct is still to punish the people who noticed rather than revise the incentives that made the situation possible. That is the operating cost. The ClearMaps exist to make it measurable instead of endless content warfare. In this case, the measurement is unambiguous.